So I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we work today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this webinar. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and recognise and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of New South Wales. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar, The Vital Role of Marketing in Delivering Your Strategic Plan. My name is Kim Kellaway, and I'm the Head of Clients and Markets at HLB Mann Judd. I would particularly like to welcome all of our new ENFP community members this morning. So as you are aware, we recently launched our Not-for-Profit Leaders Report on Strategic Planning 2022. One of the top key findings in that survey saw 72% of organisations are expecting their revenue to grow if their strategic plan was achieved. Continuing on that conversation, our webinar this morning looks at the importance of marketing and communications to support the organisation's strategic plan. So I'd like to introduce our guest speakers for this morning. Terri Martin. Terri is General Manager of the Marketing Room, a marketing consultancy that places senior marketing managers into businesses on a part-time basis. Terri has worked in marketing her whole career, but has also run businesses for the past 10 years, including 2 charities. So she understands the commercial needs of business. She is also on the board of ADHD Australia and continues to have a strong affiliation with the not-for-profit community. We're very lucky to have Louise Cummins. Louise is the Chief Marketing Officer for World Vision Australia and has more than 20 years experience in marketing, management and organisational change. She's been named in the top 50 CMO list for 2021 and was a finalist in BNT's Best of the Best Marketer for 2021. She has also served on several not-for-profit boards and has authored a children's book. Terri, I'd like to hand the webinar over to you.
Thank you so much, Kim. Look, welcome everybody. It's so wonderful to be talking to you all today about this really important topic. I'm very passionate about it. Obviously, both Louise and I am. I just want to quickly clarify what marketing is. I know we've got a broad, diverse range of people watching today, some of which have marketing experience and some of maybe don't. But marketing essentially is the process of identifying an organisation's unique benefits, understanding your ideal client, customer or audience, and then placing that message in front of as many of those people as possible to ultimately drive action. Whether it's members you're trying to get for your organisation, whether it's fundraisers, whether it's government, they all apply to that basic principle. So now I'm just going to move on, and Louise, I'd like to start with the first question. So HLB Mann Judd recently completed a survey with its members about their strategic planning, and I was really interested to find out that 4 of the top 5 strategic plan priorities would actually need marketing and comms to drive them. So they were providing new services to existing clients, acquiring new clients that receive existing services, collaborating with other NFPs, and developing or diversifying the funding model. Why do you think it's important for NFPs to use marketing and comms to support the success of their strategic plans?
Yeah, thanks. So actually, I put this together. This is how World Vision structures our marketing team. So we've actually got product development, we've got brand, we've got campaigns. There's a PR and advocacy component, which sits sort of under the marketing umbrella, but actually there's a new sort of area for that. There's a dedicated area. We also then look after CX and digital design, and also there's some elements of that partnership support as well. So where I think it's interesting in that research, I think really indicates is, I think so often our boards actually land at much more that campaign execution, but actually marketing spans so much more than just that campaign execution. So that's why I think it's incredibly important for NFPs to actually understand that and really use your marketing team to all their strengths to actually really secure that great foundational, great foundation for your business.
Thank you. I was watching the project last night. I was happy to see that there was sponsorship of World Vision on that. So well done. Can you explain to us why marketing in comms is actually so important to World Vision.
So very specifically, we're all about connection and connecting people for good. So we're about how do we teach Australians to be generous, and we're, it's a rite of passage to give. So how making sure that it's not just this, it's a two-way transaction. So, and we'll talk about that in a little while. It's not just about asking, but how do we actually give at the same time? So the other part of it is obviously then our programs out with the First Nations, and also out with, all our different projects all around the world, the millions of children that we sponsor through child sponsorship. So marketing is central, because if we're thinking about that connection between the donor and our service delivery, we are the cornerstone of that connection and communicating that connection and developing that connection.
Right, fantastic. From my experience, what I've seen a lot of kind of smaller NFPs do is they use marketing to promote fundraising initiatives. Why do you think they also need it to support their brand positioning as well?
Sure. So I'm, well, this actually goes probably more to that previous point, which is one of the biggest points that I think is important to note is the fact that we actually have in World Vision, we're looking at this Scott Galloway clock model, and how actually marketing supports in each of those different sections. So I think it's actually a really interesting model for people to reflect on, is when you think about your business, have you really connected with what that pre-purchase, and that's all the campaigns, but then what is that purchase experience? And then post-purchase, what's those retention tools? What is that value exchange that you're giving them? So sorry, then going into that next sort of slide, which was, it is so much more than just fundraising. So you talked about, where that brand fits versus the conversion. So I'm sure many of the people on the call know, but it actually takes you 9 times, so 7 to 9 times to see a brand before you take action. Now that's an incredible amount, considering that there's such a diversity of communication channels. We're inundated with all these different messages. So, but on average, your donors need to see you 7 times. So then we're actually, if you go into, so a big piece of this, and for the marketers on the call, they know this automatically, but there are some people that might not have seen this, which is on the next slide, which is around the conversion funnel. So this is a really important piece that I'm sure many of you have seen. But when you're looking at the ROI on your campaigns, you have to understand where it actually fits into that conversion funnel. So whilst it's very important to have that, we often sort of land, especially in the not-for-profit world, at that conversion piece. So let's just try and get them convert. But actually they need to see that message at least 7 times. And actually, how do you really build that awareness? And not just that, how do you get them to consider? And then you go into conversion. So that brand piece is really essential, because otherwise you're really doing yourself a disservice, because they won't necessarily, just convert like that. So I think that's where an important piece of the puzzle is. So that's why I do think it is so much more than just fundraising.
So it's about building that relationship with those that you're asking to provide, money to you, before you actually then ask them to provide money with you, so that they trust and believe in you. I know obviously World Vision has a very strong and large marketing team, and a lot of smaller NFPs don't have a marketing team. In fact, what they probably have more is fundraising. But tell me what you think that investing in a marketing resource could actually do for a smaller NFP.
So marketing, I love this quote that you put down, it is an investment, not a cost. I think the biggest thing for me is really understanding. So I've worked with smaller not-for-profits and been on boards as well. I think the key thing is really, and you mentioned it at the start, is actually really understanding what your value proposition is, and then working out that strategy. I think it is harder for smaller not-for-profits, because you've only got so much budget. So I think you have to be very clever and strategic in how you actually build those, build your audience. And that's why, you know, sometimes the traditional marketing route that you might sort of, you know, traditional media might not be the right thing for you. It might actually be partnerships. It might be PR. It might be, you know, in media engagement. There's a lot of different ways to actually to go down that road. But one of the things I would actually also really recommend, having again been in the smaller not-for-profits, is choose your key priorities. I've seen so many people with so much passion leaving corporate world and trying to actually duplicate their entire strategy in a small not-for-profit, and they burn themselves out. So how do you actually just choose on the smaller things and do them right, like, and get radical focus? That would be my big suggestion. And then it is an investment, not a cost.
That's a really good point, Lou. I just want to add to that as well, is often, you know, what we see is people can go in and just do marketing. You know, I'll do a bit of this, do a bit of that. What really needs to happen is that alignment of your business goals to the right marketing channels. So it's exactly what you're saying. It's being really, really focused. And perhaps that means letting other things go to ensure that you can actually deliver on your business goals and your strategic plan. So this is an interesting question, a little bit diverted off. Where once upon a time people worked in NFPs, you know, to align with their purpose and give back. Now we're seeing big corporates focusing heavily on purpose, and I dare say competing with NFPs for staff. What role do you think marketing plays in helping NFPs to acquire and retain staff?
Obviously, you know, everybody, I'm sure everybody on the call is struggling with this as well. There's labour shortages everywhere. So obviously having a strong brand that's very connected to, you know, we talked about connection. If you're connected to that brand, you're much more likely to actually want to work for them. I would say that it's, you know, that's a really big piece. You know, I think you need, it is definitely, you need to develop the brand to get the right people in. But I will acknowledge at the moment it's very challenging, especially in the digital space. And even though people want to be aligned with purpose, they sort of, there's a lot of jumping around, especially in that digital space. So it is quite hard to actually secure the right talent.
64% of HLB's ENFP members, the wonderful people we've got on the line here, said they're considering new partnerships in 22-23. What's your view on how integral marketing and comms is in the success of partnerships for NFPs? And just before you answer, I'd like to say, kind of in my experience, what I've noticed is that partnerships sometimes are only as good as how you communicate them. And that might be communicating internally to your staff about why you're taking on a partnership, communicating perhaps to government, perhaps to your fundraising and corporates, and perhaps to the wider community. I think it's actually really important that everyone understands why you've done what you've done and what benefit that provides to them. So I'll get you to answer that question myself.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different levels of partnerships. One is obviously, as many people on the call would be getting federal and state funding. So obviously the partnership is actually with the government, and then that's actually a whole different sort of suite of comms and advocacy and making sure you're actually working with the marketing team to get the right assets within that channel. So there's the funding partnerships. Then there's obviously the service delivery partnerships, which is probably in NFPs probably not necessarily sitting with the marketing team, but the marketing team can definitely help with sort of doing proposals for that. Where marketing, I think, really comes into its own, it's how do we actually amplify and actually get so those bigger ticket pieces, whether it's, you know, big corporates, you know, like the Optuses or Telstras of this world. And my comment to that is they are fantastic, but also be very mindful of how long it takes to actually land those. And so you do need sort of pretty very targeted sort of approach, because you can go down a number of rabbit holes. But to your point, it's not just about setting it up, it's then actually about making sure that you amplify that in a really meaningful way. So not just, you know, we've ticked the box and got this partnership, but really rely on your marketing teams to actually, not rely, but also really work with them, because they can help with all elements of those partnerships, even if they are service delivery, just make sure that you're actually including your marketing teams with all of those opportunities.
And last question for you, Lou. Where do you see the future role of marketing and comms in relation to NFPs?
Look, it's really challenging, and I think that's why there are people on the call today. It is, 20 years ago when terrible when you realise you've been in a job for, industry for over 20 years, is it was so linear, right? So it was, these are the P's, this is the, you have above the line and it's 3 different TV stations. Now it's like completely different, channel diversification is, and then all the digitization and where does Web 3.0 fit in and cookieless future. And I think it can be quite overwhelming. So I think it is extremely challenging to then contextualize your communication depending on the channel and actually getting clear about segmentation without actually going down too many rabbit holes. So marketing is challenging, but with that said, it's exciting. That's the thing that gets me out of bed in the morning. I love it's constantly changing. We're talking to Meta about what does the metaverse look like in terms of moving forward, and the opportunities of like doing virtual field visits through glasses and all sorts of things. There's some amazing opportunities that are out there. So one of the things I would suggest though is what you can do now is we use the Gazelle Growth Tools model for the marketing team, but basically come back with what is your 3-year plan and then break it down every quarter and then review that quarterly. But my other suggestion is keep thinking about the next 12 months in advance. Don't just think about, the immediate sort of next quarter. So whilst there can be lots of things happening, if you have the right structure, and that goes back to your first slide, what is the right structure? What are you really trying to do? What are those big KPIs? Get that structure, get the big BHAG, which is the big, hairy, audacious goal, but then actually review it quarterly and make sure that you're actually connecting with what's working, what's not working, understanding the trends without it being too buoyant. So making sure you still get that radical focus. So, and make sure you get the right resources, Terry's talking today because you don't necessarily need to have massive internal teams. Where are those external teams that you can get to support, or virtual teams? There's a whole heap of different options. So that's the other thing is just, really reflect on how you actually build up your current resources. And I'm a big believer also is making sure you're really focused on upskilling those resources, especially in the digital space. So if you've got a really good team at the moment, make sure you're investing in making sure they know about 3.0, make sure that they know about cookieless future, make sure they know about latest sort of regulations around data and privacy. Marketing is constantly evolving, and you need to make sure that your teams are actually learning every single quarter, that they're enlisted in courses to make sure that they're keeping abreast of the latest developments.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate your time today, Louise.
Okay, so we're now turning to our Q&A. So we have a question, and I'll pose it to both of you, but Louise first. Should small not-for-profits focus on quick wins to establish marketing as necessary?
I think it's always important if you've got a board and you're trying to actually give them confidence in what you're doing, I think you shouldn't downplay the quick wins. But I think it's always that balance, right? So it's about still being very connected to what the longer term strategy is, but give the sugar hits of how do you break that down so that they can see those wins early rather than, so it's not about being addicted to the quick wins, but if my suggestion would be make sure you have the longer vision, but give the, break it down so that they can see the quick wins. It'll make it a whole heap easier to get them to buy into the longer term strategy if they can see early wins.
Terri, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with Lou. There is a need sometimes for businesses, organisations to be seen to be doing something. I think it's really, really important that whilst you're doing that, you are not losing sight of the fact that you need to do the right marketing for the, the business goals and vision. So yes, you can be doing some things here, show the board, show the exec team, yes, we're getting some traction, but actually longer term, you need to also ensure that you're doing the things that are actually going to deliver the ROI. They're actually going to deliver on the business goals for the organisation as well. So yeah, I agree. It's a mixture of both.
So that's a fantastic segue into my question for Louise, which is the magic formula of ROI. So how do you treat an ROI on a campaign, especially when it takes 9 times for a brand to be recognised?
Yeah, certainly. So we have a range of metrics. So it gives a scorecard of the overall health. So things like I would highly recommend that everybody on the call has yearly, and I'm sure many of you do already, yearly brand awareness metrics and also relevance metrics. So make sure that some of them will be done. So to answer your question, if you're doing a campaign, you might not get understanding of where those brand metrics are for that campaign, because then that's a bigger, but you'll have a sense every year of where you're actually traveling. I then have metrics for every single campaign. So, we factor in our child sponsorship numbers, whether there's cancellations, what does the retention model look like, all of those. So there's a whole heap of different data points that give us a very good clarity of where we're actually having that scoreboard. And for us, that's really important from a board perspective as well. And also, a wider business perspective to make sure that we're actually tracking according to plan. The harder challenge is probably around brand investment, because it is sometimes, 3 to 5 years till you actually see that real sort of change in that brand investment and brand awareness. So what we do is then a series of just as much data points and modelling that we can get, leveraging third-party data to make sure that we're actually taking people along the ride to actually understand where that ROI will sit and at what time in that duration. So it might not sit in year 1, it might sit in year 2.
Okay. Excellent. Well, it looks as though that's all the questions that we have. Does anyone have any questions for Terri or Louise? Seem to have covered everything, ladies, which is fantastic. So, Terri, if you would like to promote who your business is and how you can assist the ENFP members.
Yes, of course. So the Marketing Room is a consultancy, and we place senior marketing managers into businesses on a part-time basis. So you get senior marketing thinking, but at a much more affordable cost.
Fantastic. So that finalises our presentation for this morning, and I would like to thank Terri Martin and Louise Cummins for their time. The presentation will be emailed to you together with the recording, and we'll also upload those to the ENFP LinkedIn community page. We're just about to finalise our next ENFP briefing, so those details will be sent out to you in the next few weeks. But please reach out to myself at HLB Manjudd in terms of your strategic planning. If you're just about to go into planning mode, we would love to be able to assist you through that process. So I'd like to thank you all for attending this morning. Thank you again, Terri and Louise.
Thank you.